a friend of mine, and he had been gassed, I only knew him as a very short
So that was the name.
Okay, that's
Right, Walter Joseph.
So I assume the other man is Walter Thomas.
Yeah.
Would you come by car?
Yeah, parked over in the farm car park.
Okay.
It's free today, I trust.
Fine. Yeah, fine.
So you're in the sociology department?
I'm in the sociology department, this is where we are. It's been really interesting to hear people talking about the things they've bought, either as they wait for things to be digitised or before they go in for their interview. So I think that the space here, although it looks chaotic, has worked quite well, just in terms of hearing more about people outside the interview, what the things are that they've bought. I'll look forward to seeing it all once it's digitised and actually sort of hearing the interviews, because the interviews have been done in a separate space, so people have said things that we don't know about, so it'll be kind of interesting to kind of put it all together, a bit like a jigsaw later on, to match the images up to the stories. I think, we weren't sure what to expect, but it's been way beyond what we thought we might be getting, and we've had more people, which is good, than we thought we would have, and it's felt much busier than I thought we thought it would be. So, although that's had its issues, that's been a good thing on the whole. Yeah. I think the fact that people have objects with them makes it very different. If you come in and you just have a story to tell, I think it's rather more weighty, but the fact that there are objects to which you can associate, I think, kind of lightens things up quite a lot and gives an easy way into people's personal connection to the object. I've been surprised by how many objects people have brought in, and I knew from Age Exchange that this might be the case, but I hadn't guessed that, we have somebody here at the moment, for example, whose father kept very intricate records of his war and lots of photographic evidence of airships that he was flying. So he has log books, he has pictures of them being built, of them being inflated, of various trips. So that some of the documentation is way more extensive than I would have guessed it could be. We can't digitise all that, but it's just interesting to think the amount of heritage people could carry in their families.
What's the object of this charity? Is it to bring people together to talk about it?
It is, and it's also to tell untold stories, really. And the thing that we wanted to do was, as he's probably said, but was not necessarily to tell kind of military stories, but to tell the stories that people have passed down through generations and families, and that's what's been remarkable about it, really. Yeah. So, which member of your family did you come to?
My great uncle.
Great uncle.
You'll be doing most of the talking, won't you?
As I say, there's not an awful lot to tell you, really.
I can see from coming from a very tough background, he would be looking for, the kind of politics of the left, or did he think that way?
I don't fully know. My hunch would be that being a rural labourer like he was, shearers had unions. There were, he had the pre-First World War period is a period of strong union kind of growth and activism, in Australia. So he'd have encountered all that. But politicised, my hunch would be, and I think that he was politicised in the Camel Corps.
Right. Because
the Camel Corps were known to be anti-authoritarian, hard to discipline, and sort of truculent. And it was even said that commanders who didn't want men going to France, to the old country, put them in the Camel Corps to keep them out of harm's way, because they would be let loose in the desert and they wouldn't be any trouble to civilised people.
You can see my scrawl here as I went through the interviews. I explained that it would be being recorded, but I would be taking notes for the purposes of providing key points here.
It's been interesting. There were stories that I'd not heard before, even though we'd done all the interviews of the Great War, and stories of a man whose father was an airship commander, patrolling the British Channels for submarines and airships that I didn't know even sort of happened. a gentleman whose one of his grandfathers had fought in East Africa, while the other one had been sent to Murmansk in Russia to fight on behalf of the White Russians and guard Bolshevik prisoners. So it shows what a huge story the First World War is.
Amazing, very good actually. So I think we've all had 5 interviews. I've had 5. 4 were signed up and 1 turned up. And yes, they've all brought really powerful stories. I think there are several that stand out, as some stories do, but everything has offered something.
It's absolutely what I hoped it would be, because I filled in the places where I hadn't been before, investigated certain points.
It brought up old memories, and I was quite emotional, which surprised me.
It made me think about things that I'd not necessarily thought about before. So some of the questions that were asked, you think, oh, actually, I'd never really considered that. So it made you think about how you felt about things.
What we talked about mainly was my great uncle, because he was actually in the Merchant Navy during the First World War, and he was torpedoed in 1917, and that the effect of being in an open boat for so long did affect him for the rest of his life.
An illumination of what some people went through, which is, in those days, is different from what happens today. We're more enlightened today, but in those far-off days, they suffered on their own. There wasn't any help from doctors and counselling and goodness knows what.
Outside of the family, we weren't. My father and his mother were encouraged not to talk about it to other people for fear of reprisals.
Captain Charles Fryatt, and he became a sort of for the Admiralty and for the government at the time, became a propaganda tool. The murder of Captain Fryatt. And his name now adorns all sorts of things, like a mountain in Canada.
It has really brought home how significant the First World War still is in many people's lives. 100 years since its outbreak, and it's still very close to the surface, I think, for many, many people, and not just elderly people remembering their since dead, deceased parents. It's relatively young people too, thinking passed on through 2 generations. So it made me very much more aware of that, and I'm really excited to sit and have a look at the objects, the images we've got.
It is a newspaper clipping entitled Captain Fryatt and the Spies. So, and I don't know what newspaper it's from. But it's nice to have a nice ripped kind of torn-edged cutting an object.
Yeah, he said my mother was higher rank. They both ended up as...
A little statement here from Asquith. When the time arrives, we are determined to bring to justice the criminals, whoever they may be and whatever position they may occupy. So it was talked about in dispatches, and actually a letter from the palace was sent to the family as well, sending their condolences.
That's the discharge book. The replacement discharge book for when the Kenmore went down.
Okay, I can. Oh, I know how to do this. It's fine. Yeah. We will do it.
Can you actually hear it well enough? Yeah.
No, don't come out.
Yeah, no. I'm just. So it's. We've got that. That's it.
Not just about talking about our things, it's meeting all the other people and hearing their stories. It's just been great, hasn't it?
It's been a really powerful day, really extraordinary material and very, very moving stories, which just really hits home that I can't believe it's 100 years ago, because these people's lives are still so present in the lives of their children, and that has really struck us today.
see, it wasn't until I started on this that I'd ever mentioned to anybody that my mother came rushing down the stairs in the times of the Zeppelins, when they were overhead in London, round St Paul's Way, and she was working on the top floor of a building there. And so they said, come on, you've got to run down to the basement. So she ran down, but in her excitement she fell somewhere. I shouldn't laugh, but my mother was a bit clumsy sometimes. And she fell and went down, and she was shaken, and so they gave her a cigarette, aged about 18 she would have been, yes. She had her first cigarette, and that of course started a lifetime of 10 cigarettes a day until she died of cancer.